Unbowed Chiwenga walks into enemy territory and laughs in their face. Zimbabwe. Welcome back, Kumzinda Wevan, the channel that follows the story wherever it goes. No fear, no filter, no favor. Children Emunzwe, Zimbabwe. 48 hours ago, we reported that fringe groups, in fact, within 48 hours ago, it's a couple of hours ago, the report issues that fringe groups linked to the presidential faction had issued public death threats against Vice President Constantino Chiwenga. Gunfire threats, open, public, and apologized for. Against the sitting vice president, against the retired general, against the men who liberated this country. Right now, we have our answer from the general himself. He did not hold a press conference. He did not release a statement. He did not go on television. He did something far more powerful than any of that. He got in a car, he drove to Manicaland, he walked into a funeral in Chigori village, dressed in black. He greeted the ZANU-PF provincial leadership with a smile and a handshake. Oh, he laughed openly, comfortably, in front of everyone. And in Zimbabwe's political language, that laugh was louder than any statement he could have made. That laugh said, I see your threats, I read your statements, I know your plans, and I am here anyway. Zimbabwe, today we are going to break down what this Manicaland appearance really means. The symbolism, the strategy, the signal it sends to every faction, every general, every backbench MP who is watching to see which way the wind blows. Because in Zimbabwe politics right now, every move is a message. And today's message from Chiwenga was delivered with a smile. So the appearance, every detail, we're reading every detail. Let us start with the facts of what happened and why each detail matters. Vice President Chiwenga traveled to Chigori village in Manicaland to attend the memorial service of his late brother-in-law, Mr. Peter Mobi. Now, on the surface, this is a family matter, a man attending a funeral, nothing political about it. But nothing in Zimbabwe politics right now is just a family matter. And observers on the ground noted three specific things about how Chiwenga carried himself that are politically significant. First, he was described as composed, unmoved, in control. This is a man who, in the last 48 hours, he had groups affiliated with the ruling faction threatening to shoot him. And he arrived at a public event surrounded by people, including provincial ZANU-PF officials who publicly support the ED 2030 agenda. And he was composed, not nervous, not guarded, not surrounded by an unusual number of bodyguards making a show of security theater. Composed, Zimbabwe. Secondly, he was laughing, genuinely, visibly laughing, greeting people cordially. The body language of a man who is exactly where he wants to be, doing exactly what he has decided to do on his own terms. And then the third thing, and this is the most politically loaded detail of all, he greeted Manicaland chairman Tino Machakaire, popularly known as Doza, warmly. Now, Machakaire is one of the loudest public voices for the ED 2030 campaign. He is not a quiet supporter. He is an active, vocal, publicly committed member of the faction that is pushing Cap 3. And Chiwenga walked up to him, greeted him, smiled in public, in front of cameras and observers. What is Chiwenga saying with that? He is saying, Imi, I know exactly what Muribanan. I know who you are. I know what you publicly support. And I am not afraid of you, not even a little bit. Come, shake my hand. Morse. That is power, Zimbabwe. Not the power of guns or promotions or t-shirts printed in Johannesburg. The power of a man who knows exactly where he stands and walks into any room accordingly. So the daylight versus night divide. The most important story nobody is telling. But here's where the story gets truly fascinating. And this is the angle that analysts are calling the most significant development of this entire political crisis. The warm reception Chiwenga received from provincial officials who publicly support the 2030 campaign reveals that observers are calling a profound daylight versus night divide within ZANU-PF. Muri kuchindara nyaya yachi muri Zimbabwe. Muri kunyadza kuchiteerera. Pane kakusiyana. Pane zvinotaurwa nevanhu publicly vachizama kufadza who is the president right now, currently Mnangagwa, and what they really think behind closed doors. Think about what that means in practice. In the daylight, in public, at rallies, at press conferences, in party meetings, these officials are singing ED 2030 songs, wearing ED 2030 t-shirts, endorsing the constitutional amendment. That is their public position. That is the face they show when the cameras are on and the party whip is watching. But in the night, cannot privately, in their actual human interactions, in the way they greet Chiwenga at a funeral in Chigori village, the warmth is genuine. The respect is genuine. The connection to the man who represents military legitimacy, liberation credentials, and the possibility of a different future, that is genuine too. Chiwenga has faced the hostilities in recent weeks, including attacks from the party's National Secretary for Legal Affairs. Yet, he has continued to call out corruption openly, denouncing individuals he calls Zvigananda. Ndio akanyora chunechi. Parasitic elites feeding off the national trough while ordinary Zimbabweans suffer. And the rank and file of the party, the provincial officials, the ordinary members, the people who actually live in the communities that ZANU-PF is supposed to serve, they hear that message. They see the Zvigananda eating while their constituents struggle. They know who is speaking the truth. They just cannot say it publicly yet. Yet, that word is doing a lot of work in this analysis because May 18th is coming. And when MPs walk into that chamber to vote on CAB 3, the question is whether the public face or the private face shows up, whether daylight wins or night wins. Chiwenga's appearance in Manicaland today was partly about answering that question. He is reminding every official in that province, Manicaland, and by extension, every official watching nationally, that he sees them, that he knows the real conversation, and that when the moment comes, they will have to choose. Now, Zimbabwe, let us talk about the context surrounding this Manicaland appearance, because this is Chiwenga's first major public outing since the King Hezekiah sermon, the church address that has dominated political discourse for days and shown absolutely no signs of fading. For those who missed our previous coverage, Chiwenga stood in a church and delivered what appeared on the surface to be a spiritual reflection. He spoke about leaders who sought extra years beyond their appointed time. He invoked the biblical King Hezekiah, who prayed for more years and received them, only to spend those extra years in circumstances that brought him ruin rather than glory. He said very deliberately, very calmly, that extra years are not always a blessing. Said by the Vice President about extending terms days before CAB 3 goes to Parliament. The political interpretation was so obvious that even the government's own damage control machinery went into overdrive trying to reframe it. The speech was described as a meticulously coded declaration of intent, a moral manifesto that could shape the trajectory of Zimbabwe's succession politics, framed against the hallowed hills of Manicaland, a symbolic gateway of the liberation struggle. Chiwenga's language read deliberately for the revolutionary canon. And now, he is back in Manicaland, back in the province. He has repeatedly used a platform for his most powerful statements. Chiwenga has previously described Manicaland as profoundly symbolic, saying Mutare occupied a sacred place in the liberation history of the country, a crucial gateway through which thousands of Zimbabwean sons and daughters crossed into Mozambique to wage the struggle for independence. Murupanzo. He is not choosing these locations randomly, Zimbabwe. Every time Chiwenga wants to say something important, something that is bigger than one political moment, something that connects to the deeper legitimacy of who he is and where he comes from, he comes to Manicaland. He stands on the ground where the liberation struggle passed through. And he reminds everyone watching that his roots run deeper than any press release or WhatsApp thread. So, the 2030 faction tried to claim the misrepresented scripture, that he misunderstood King Hezekiah, that his sermon was not a political statement, and that the Zimbabwe public laughed, vakaseka, because everyone heard it, everyone understood it, and the demand for part 2 of that sermon has only grown louder since. So nhasi ari kuManicaland, which his presence, with his composure, with his smile, Chiwenga delivered part 2 without saying a word. All right, let's talk about the security signal. What his freedom of movement tells us, More Zimbabwe. Now, here's the analysis that I think is most important for understanding where the real power sits right now. A sitting vice president just received public gunfire threats from groups affiliated with the ruling faction. And those groups are still free, not arrested, not questioned. The police, who have been very efficient at arresting students for distributing flyers and activists for attending my public hearings, have somehow found no agency in tracking down people who openly threatened to shoot the vice president. And yet, Chiwenga is moving freely across provinces with confidence, without any visible sign of fear or restriction. What does that tell you? It tells you that Chiwenga's security does not depend on the formal police force. It does not depend on the Home Affairs Ministry or the ZRP or any state institution that can be captured by the faction controlling government appointments. Chiwenga is already toured Matabeleland South, Matabeleland North, Bulawayo, Midlands, Masvingo, and now Manicaland, a schedule that has kept him moving across country for weeks. So, critics initially said this provincial tower schedule was designed to keep him busy in remote areas while major political decisions were made in Harare. But look at it from the other angle. Every province he visits is a province where he is seen, where he shakes hands, where he looks people in the eye, where the local leadership receives him and the community witnesses his presence. He is not being kept busy. He is building a map, a national map of presence, connection, and quiet alliance. And he is doing it under threat, which means every person who receives him warmly under those circumstances is making a statement of their own. Every handshake with a provincial official who publicly supports ED 2030 is a handshake that says, when the time comes, I know where I stand. As a former commander, Chiwenga remains the most military respected figure in government. His anti-corruption stance resonates with the public, but risks alienating entrenched networks within the state and parties that thrive on patronage. So balancing moral authority with pragmatic alliances will be decisive. And that balancing act is exactly what we are watching in real time. Every appearance, every smile, every handshake, every carefully chosen location. This is a man who is playing this game at the highest possible level, under the most extreme possible pressure, and doing it with his boots polished and his chin up. So let's talk about the Machakaire handshake, the Tino Machakaire handshake, decoding the doza moment. I want to spend a specific moment on the Machakaire interaction because I think it is the most underreported detail in this whole story. Tino Machakaire doza is not a peripheral figure in the 2030 campaign. He is one of the most energetic public champions. Young, loud, visible, the kind of figure the 2030 faction uses to show that the next generation is behind ED. And Chiwenga walked up to him, greeted him, laughed with him in front of witnesses. Now, think about that Machakaire's options were in that moment. Think about what Machakaire's options were in that moment. He could have been cold. He could have been distant. He could have done the minimum required by protocol and moved on. Instead, by all accounts, the reception was warm, cordial, human. Why does that matter? Because it means that even the people publicly committed to the 2030 agenda are not prepared to be openly hostile to Chiwenga in person. The threats come from fringe groups. The gunfire language comes from unnamed spokespeople. But face to face, when the general is standing in front of you, the warmth comes out. That gap between the public rhetoric and the private reality is exactly where political shifts happen in Zimbabwe. It is the gap that Chiwenga is exploiting with every handshake, every smile, every composed arrival at every venue across every province. Chiwenga has repeatedly warned that Zimbabwe's destiny cannot be privatized. The Vision 2030 must be a moral compass, not a political slogan. And that those who died in the liberation struggle left a moral duty to live with integrity, unity, and service. Their blood, he says, cries out against corruption, laziness, and moral decay. That message, spoken in Manicaland on liberation struggle ground, with mountains that gorillas once crossed to fight for freedom, lands differently than a party resolution read at a press conference in Harare. It lands in the bones, and everyone who grew up in this party knows it. Right? So we come back to the 18-day, to the 16-day clock. What comes next? Muswa 18 May. We are counting down 16 days to 18 May. And in those 18 days, in those 16 days, based on everything we are seeing, here's what to watch. Watch whether the gunfire threat makers are arrested. Because if they are not, that is an official signal about whose side the formal security apparatus is on. And if they are arrested, that is an equally powerful signal that someone higher up decided the optics were too dangerous to ignore. Watch whether Chiwenga continues his provincial tower. Every province he visits between now and May 18th is a province being quietly briefed on something. The visible schedule is economic projects. The invisible schedule is something else entirely. Watch the ZANU-PF backbenchers, because the daylight versus night divide we discussed today does not only exist in Manicaland. It exists in every constituency, in every MP's private thoughts, in every senator who has publicly endorsed the CAB 3, but privately wonders what happens to them in the post-CAB 3 world if Chiwenga's faction ends up on the right side of history. Whether Chiwenga's gambit succeeds will depend less on eloquence than on endurance, the ability to inhabit both the memorial high ground and the political trenches simultaneously. And today in Manicaland, dressed in black at a family funeral, laughing with the chairman of the 23rd Faction's provincial chapter, 48 hours after receiving gunfire threats, Chiwenga demonstrated that endurance, quietly powerful, without a single word to the press. Takuvara mure Zimbabwe. I want to leave you with this. Constantino Chiwenga has been in dangerous rooms before. He has planned a coup. He has survived poisoning allegations. He has navigated the Mugabe era, the post-Mugabe transition, the political warfare of the Second Republic. He has been to China for medical treatment. He has been written off as a wounded buffalo more times than he can count. And every time, every single time, he has come back composed, in control, laughing in rooms where other men would be afraid to enter. Today in Chigori village, he did it again. Under death threats, under the most intense political pressure of his career, he showed up, greeted his party colleagues, attended to his family, and sent a message to every person watching, in the party, in the military, in the province, in parliament, in the diaspora, that said simply, I am not going anywhere. In Chess family, the most dangerous move is sometimes the one that looks completely calm. The move that says, I see everything on this board. I am not panicking, and I am exactly where I have chosen to be. May 18th is coming, and the general is ready. What do you think, Mure Zimbabwe? Is Chiwenga's composure real, or is he masking the pressure? And do you think his provincial presence is changing minds in those backbenches where it matters most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this with every Zimbabwean who needs to understand what is really happening in this country right now. Because the next 16 days are going to be the most important days in Zimbabwe's political history since November 2017. This is your boy, Pano Pamzinda Weban, fearless, free, pro-democracy. Stay tuned, stay subscribed, stay following. Thank you for watching.